Hello. My name is Louis Latour. I'm a DevOps at FHIR, and it's my pleasure to introduce one of my colleagues, Mirjam, and she will give an introduction on Smart on FHIR. So a reminder, you can also, while she's speaking, ask your question on Wova, and then either she answer or we can answer afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Welcome, everyone, to the intro to Smart on FHIR. So I will just give an introduction, and already Louis said that if you have any questions, you can put them in the Wova app. Especially do that with more in-depth questions, please, because then a couple of colleagues will also be able to monitor and answer anything that I might not have an answer to. So I am Mirjam. I'm part of the FHIR team since 2012, mainly in the role of training coordinator. Well, of course, by now you probably know, at least if you've been to my sessions, that we are not an event organization company. We are actually a healthcare tech company, so we provide tools and consultancy and services around the FHIR specification. Training as well, by the way. So what we will talk about in this presentation is, first of all, just what is Smart on FHIR. Then we'll dive into the authentication authorization part a little bit, and I will tell you how Smart on FHIR leverages the standards that are out there. We will end with a small demo so you can actually see something like that working. Even though it's a simple test thing that's running on my computer, but it will give you a general idea of the flow of things. So starting with Smart on FHIR, the SMART group originated in Boston. And you can see from this screen here that they already have started in 2009. And maybe if you know the timeline of FHIR didn't exist yet. This is taken from their website, lots of information on there, and I want to do a shout out to the team, especially Josh Mandel, who has done a lot of things around Smart and usually does the presentations as well, but he's not here currently, and of course all the other people from the Smart team as well. There's quite a lot of information on the website, so if you get a chance, just visit that link and you can see all of what the team does. Because it's not limited to the topic that I will talk about today, the authorization authentication part, but they have other initiatives and projects as well. The S from SMART stands for substitutability. They wanted to be able to have developers write an app once and then run that anywhere without having to change the code. So that could mean that a single app could run against different vendor systems, or the single app could run in different contexts, for example, being a standalone app or being an app that is integrated into an EHR system. So in order to be able to achieve that and help developers with this, that's what the Smart on team focused on, and they looked at open standards. So that's also why at some point in that timeline, they actually discovered FHIR for being able to do the healthcare data exchange. But of course, part of what they need to think about as well is secure communication, and they have focus on privacy and regulatory requirements as well. If you are a developer, I've put another link on here. You can get there from the main site, of course, but they have a whole page on developer resources, and there's technical documentation on the bottom link, docs.smarthealthit.org. So you can go there if you really want to try out as well. They have got lots of open source things available. You can go to their GitHub repository. They have a sandbox server, and they have simple tutorials to build a small Smart on FHIR app as well. So they wanted to be able to have developers create apps that could quickly be integrated. And fortunately, they did get the vendors also on board. So they had all kinds of sessions where they had the initiative and put vendors around the table. And that, of course, meant that they could discuss the needs, the needs that app developers would have. And one of the things is, of course, having an open or a standard API to use with the healthcare data exchange standard that they found, well, FHIR. So they, in their documentation, talk about 2 app launch flows. You have the EHR launch, as I already mentioned, and then the standalone app launch. But also they have later on focused on having back-end services as well. So one of the projects you will be able to see that they do back-end system synchronization, for example. Now, I did mention vendors. Well, you can see Microsoft and Apple listed here. This is taken from the Smart Health IT website as well. They have links behind them, so you can take a look at all of the details that they have there. It's not the complete list, because that would just not fit on my slide. But I just wanted to show you that definitely Smart on FHIR is used and is of interest to a lot of people. And the bottom bullet tells you that in the US, EHRs are required to support Smart on FHIR for connected apps since 2023. So that's actually in the regulations, and well, therefore, of course, Smart on FHIR is something that you could be interested in. So that's just a little bit of background, and now we're going to take a look at authentication authorization. So in my use case here, we have a user, and that user wants to use an app to get access to the data. The user is the data owner, and the app needs to get access to that on behalf of the user. So the app needs to get permission to be able to do that. But we don't want the app to get all of the permissions that the user might have. So that's what's needed here is that we need to know who the user is. So we need the user to authenticate itself. And we then also need to authorize the app for the permissions that we want to allow. So authentication, that is when you are going to prove that you are who you say you are. And for that, we need some kind of an identity provider. Now, I would like to see a hands up if you recognize one of those buttons that I have on the side of the slide. Okay. Another hands up. No one has ever logged in with a Microsoft account, a Google account, or other account by a big provider? Anyone? See no hands, so, or maybe one. So yeah, we all have done this. We've authenticated ourselves. And we have identity providers like Microsoft and Google, etc., to be able to then say, yeah, okay, you are Mirjam. You've now proven it because you've logged in. The second part is the authorization part. So if I have an app and I want it to get access to my data, or part of my data, then first of all, I need to do that authentication step, and then I can say, okay, on my behalf, the app is supposed to be able to do something, so I'm going to take a look at what the app wants, and then allow the app to get access for the needs the app has. So that's authorization, to make sure that the app can get the permissions it needs to have. And of course, for that, we also need to have a service, which would be the authorization server. You could have your identity provider and authorization server in one as well, but if you look at the roles involved, that would be 2 roles there. OAuth 2.0 is a standard, an open standard, for authorization for APIs, widely used. So anyone who just put their hands up, you've actually made use of the OAuth 2 standard as well. You have, oh yeah, a couple of hands. So yeah, you can see that you have done that, yeah. So, of course, I've talked about Smart on FHIR, or the Smart team, looking at open standards. And of course, also in this case, looking at open standards that are proven technology. That's also important, that you don't just pluck something out of somewhere and say, oh, it's an open standard, so I'm going to use it. So OAuth 2 is a proven standard, and they have then looked at that for use. When you use OAuth 2, the app will get an access token as soon as the user approves the permissions. That access token has, therefore, the permissions in it, but also they have a limited lifespan, and they can be revoked by the user as well. Maybe you don't want the app to get access to your data any longer. So that's just some things around OAuth 2. In the token that the OAuth 2 standard creates, you would have scopes, and those scopes, they will tell someone that looks at the token, a system, what kind of access the token allows for. So that could be full access to the patient population on your system, or maybe read-only access to one particular resource that you have, resource type. Or not related to healthcare at all. Maybe you could have your step counts integrated, although we could make a nice FHIR resource with that as well, right? I already mentioned the user might have more rights if they would go to the system themselves without the app than the app is allowed to. So the user can choose. The app could ask for less permissions than the user would normally have when they do the actions themselves. And in the end, that will be in your token, and that's what a system will be able to use to see if the requested data or the requested action is allowed. Then there's another standard called OpenID Connect. This is the authentication layer. This is on top of OAuth 2, so you will see it always in combination with that. This is where you can have an identity token or an identity part added to the OAuth 2 token. And of course, that can be inspected to see who are we dealing with, or on behalf of who are we asking for this interaction. So I mentioned the Smart-On team found OAuth 2 as well, and what they did was actually create a specification, and you can see a link here. Part of what they did was taken up as a page in the FHIR specification as well. So that's the link that you see on top. It's about the app launch framework that Smart-On FHIR has created. And now, just to take a look at the use case here. I have a server, and in this case, it's a non-secured server. So we have Alice, our user, and she's going to start an app. So she says, start the app, I want to see my healthcare info. The app will reach out to the server and say, hey, give me all of Alice's data. Well, server's not secured, so it says, okay, here you are. Well, that's, of course, what we do not want if we want to have the secure communication. On the specification that I just mentioned to you, there are a lot of extras around when things are not in a happy flow. But since we are just in an introductory talk, I'm only going to do a happy flow of things. So in this case, we have our server. There's an authorization server and an identity provider as roles here as well, and they're all active, and my server is protected. So Alice starts the app. Then the app needs to discover that the server is actually protected, and will ask, how can I get a token? How can I prove that Alice actually allows me to see data? So the server has that information, can convey that to the app. And then the app says, oh, I now know where to get a token. Let's connect to that authorization server. Authorization server says, that's nice that you want to have a token, but you first need to prove that you are doing this on behalf of Alice. And of course, Alice then would need to prove that they are actually Alice. So the app says, I'm going to do this for Alice to the identity provider. And now the important step is there. Alice will see a login screen. But the app will not see any of the details that are communicated there, because the app will not get Alice's credentials. Otherwise, it could potentially do everything that Alice is allowed to do. So Alice needs to see that login screen, needs to prove that they're actually Alice. And, well, you can see the identity provider says, OK, this is Alice. And that tells the authorization server that that authentication step, at least, is correct and done. Next part of the flow, we now need to know whether Alice allows for the permission. So the authorization server will show usually a screen to say, hey, this app wants to get access to all of your observations, all of your conditions, your medications, anything at once. Maybe not only even read access, but also wants to write things back to the server. Do you allow for that? Well, I mentioned it's the happy flow, so Alice says, yeah, that's all okay. I just want to use the app. I'm not even going to bother with all of those checkboxes. So, okay, here we go. Okay, so now what we have is that we then get a token. So the authorization server, and I see that there's a line missing, but the authorization server will actually give a token back to the app. The token is a bearer token. That means that anyone who carries it can now use it to get the data according to the permissions. So, of course, that's why I mentioned in the documentation there's lots of extra steps to see that the app is actually an app that you can trust, etc. Also, that lifespan of the tokens is important here because you don't want to have a large lifespan of the token. Suppose the token gets leaked somewhere, then it's nice that it expires at a certain point in time, because then at least that will stop, and the one that's wanting to do bad things needs to get another token. So again, just a happy flow here. So now the app has the token and can reach out to the FHIR server and say, well, give me that data that Alice has on the system. Of course, there needs to be a check again to see if the token is still valid, if the permissions are actually permitting that particular interaction to take place. And then when that is all good, well, the server that has the FHIR data will send back the data. The app will do a nice logic, show a nice user interface, a nice graph with all of the details in, etc. So now Alice is happy. Well, the way I talk about it, it looks like this is a very long process, right? But actually, that part after logging in is just milliseconds, so that's very, very quick, all of those checks. No worries. So one of the steps was that the app needed to be able to discover that the server was secure and how to get to the authorization part. Where can I get that token? Smart on FHIR specifies the bottom one, and that's the current one, a get on our endpoint, and then you ask for the well-known smart configuration. You could maybe still encounter servers that have used the normal capability statement resource for FHIR, that's the top request, a get on the metadata, and have extensions indicating the security parts in there, including where the authorization server, the token server is. But the bottom one is what you want to use. I just wanted to make sure that you know that it could also still be in capability statements sometimes. Here's an example of our FHIR auth server, our secure server, and you can see the authorization and token endpoints on the top of the screen. So that is what you can then use to be able to request a token and get all of the details done. Part of this configuration file will also include what kind of scopes, as permission scopes, the server actually allows for. Well, I only have the top part of that. It's quite a large page in this case. So, but that can all be inside of that configuration file as well. This is not a FHIR resource. This is just a JSON structure. So when the app is going to ask for permissions, it can include some scopes already in the request. And you can see maybe the app needs to know who the patient is that is in the context of this app. So you can ask for launch context and then say, I want the launch patient, indicating that you need patient information before, or in the token, before you can actually do something with that. You can have other things as well, for example, having the user information in there as a FHIR user. If you want to read more about those scopes, there's a whole page on that, so you'll be able to go to that link and see about those scopes. Now, this is a part of the request, and then in the end token, you could have a field called patient, which has a technical identity in there for the patient resource in focus. So that patient field that you see there, that launch context parameter, that is something that you could encounter in a Smart on FHIR Auth 2 token. Well, there's others as well. Maybe you want to know the context being the encounter. So again, working with FHIR resources, technical identity would be in the token, and then that would be the context that the app can use, the system can use for all of the requests. Then another thing is the permission scopes. Smart on FHIR defines exactly what the scopes for getting access to the data have to be. We have an access type, we then specify a /, a resource type, a dot, and a permission part. There are two grammars. Smart on FHIR version 1, that had the first part, that access type, had set that to patient and user. Then any FHIR resource type can be used, or a star for all FHIR resource types. The dot, then the permission would be read, write, and star. So any read interaction would be possible if you have read permissions, and any write type interaction would be possible if you have write permissions, and of course star means everything. You can see some examples there, and what you would have in your token is actually a list of scopes, an array where you have all of those values in, if you don't use the wildcards, but just have a couple of them. This did have some flaws, because as I mentioned, with the read permission, you could have all read types accessed. So in the Smart on FHIR version 2, they have changed the grammar. They've added system for that backend system synchronization and things. We still can use the FHIR resource type name or a star, but then the permission is a combination of C, R, U, D, and S. Create, read, update, delete, search. You can create a string and specify exactly what the permissions are from those 5 that you want to have. Then another thing that they added was a question mark, and then a search parameter can be added with values. So where previously the app could ask for read information, reading observations for the patient, that would mean that the app would get access to all observations. Maybe the app only needs vital sign observations, and maybe the user doesn't want the app to get access to all of their observations. There could be some observations that are more sensitive in nature. So in the grammar version 2, you can see that they added a search parameter, which would just be a regular FHIR search parameter, and then you can limit that permission further based on that search parameter as a filter. In my example, it has the observation there with the category set to laboratory. So that would be one of the options for searching. But you can create more complicated search constructions there as well. So, yeah, that was the theory and the way that this would work when you want to secure your server with Smart on FHIR. Maybe you have to. If you do not have to, this could also be just a nice inspiration to see how you could approach this. Even if you don't want to use Smart on FHIR, well, think about using maybe OAuth 2 and other things around that. So as a quick demo, I have my server set up. Yeah, it's still running. And well, this was just that smart configuration. You can do that yourselves as well. secure.server.fhir.ly and then R4. You can ask for that well-known smart configuration. And then the same as what we've seen in the screenshot. You see the authorization endpoints, the token endpoints. Let me know if it's not readable in the back, because I can zoom in a little bit more if needed. So I've got my server running, and this one actually also does have the well-known smart configuration, but just to show you, I can also ask for the capability statement, and in this case, this system also, it's a little bit of an older one, has on the RESTful part, oh no, let me see. Oh, no, it's not secured. So, yeah, no, it's not secured. So there's no security information in there. Forgot that I was still on the unsecured part. So I've got a couple of patients on there, and if I send this request to ask for all of the patients, well, I get a nice 200 OK, and I get resources in there. Let me just collapse the entries. I have 8 patients on this system. I can look at all of them. But yeah, 8 patients, right? So now let's go secure. We'll have to let it start up a little bit. But this makes sure that my server now is secured. So let me see if I can ask for the capability statement again. No, it's still starting up there. Yes. So we have a 200 OK. So previously, I was looking for a part that has this security part. I already scrolled down till I saw REST, and then I didn't see it. But now you can see we have some extensions on here. Mind that this is the deprecated way of informing users that this is secured. But just to show you that you could still maybe encounter servers that do that, we have our endpoints listed there. And let me go back to my patient request. I can send this, but now, of course, it says you're not authorized. You need to have a token before you can actually get access to this data. OK. Let's see if we can get that done. So I can choose to ask for a token. In this part here, you can see I have some scopes that I request. So I'm asking for patient read information, and then the observation resource also just to read. That's the only things I ask for. So I'm going to get that token. But now, of course, we get to that authentication step. So I'm actually Adam, and I can log in. Now, in this case, this particular step that I have to approve the permissions is not implemented. So any permissions that were in the request will also be in the end token. But you could imagine that there's an extra step where I have some checkboxes to check off. So I now have a token that I can use. So it's now added to my request. And let's just try that request again. 200 OK. So yes, I have patient information. Look at my request. I asked for all patients on the system. We had 8. If you look at the total now, I don't know if you can see it, it's all the way down there, it says 1. Because I am Adam. I'm acting as Adam, and you can see we have a patient resource here that has that technical identity Adam. So yeah, I'm only allowed to see my own data. That is because my permission part is patient. If I were a healthcare professional, I could have a user as the first part in my scopes. And then, of course, I would have broader access. But I wanted to show you that this definitely limits to just the patient. And now I can, for my patient Adam, ask for anything. Observations. I don't even have to specify that I am Adam. I could do it, but I don't have to, because anything that I get back will be in the context of the Adam patient. So in my bundle that I get now, well, you will see there are observations, and they have to somehow be related to Adam. And in this case, that would be the subject field that links this observation to the Adam patient. I said I could request anything. So I can ask for conditions as well. But we had only put patient information, patient read, observation read in our token, right? So I get an unauthorized error message again, and no nice information. Well, it tells me I'm not authorized to read the condition resource type, so it helps me there, but no actual conditions. And that's, of course, what we want. We want the permissions in the scope to be checked, so we only get the data out of the system that we're allowed to see, or that the app, in this case, is allowed to see, according to the steps that we did previously. So, with that, let me see. Yeah. So with that, we're at the end of my presentation. I hope that you have now a better idea of what Smart on FHIR is. You can reach out to me. We still have tonight and the 2 days left of DevDays. Or you could also reach out to info@fhir.ly if you want to know more what we can do with Smart on FHIR, what our FHIRly server is capable of doing. So a couple of slides on FHIRly auth in the presentation if you download that later. As well to show you what we can do there. I hope that you want to give some feedback on this talk as well. Just put in some lines on what you thought of the talk. And then, are there any questions? Louis? Over there. Yeah, there are a couple of people sitting there. Not all of you can see them.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. That's very good. Just one question. So when you're showing that the scope, right? So the scope has the observation, but no condition. So how that get enforced between the FHIR server and the IDP? Like what happened behind the scene? Who filled this information out?
So first of all, you will have the authorization server that usually already has a list of things that you can ask for. And linked to the user, that could also be limited as well.
So that server actually holds the source of truth, all the permissions there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And then, of course, the other step is that the server, the FHIR server, has to check
that one.
The token. It has to inspect the details. And I did not show that. But if you would look at the token itself, let me just find that one. Let me see. The token. Oh. Let me just request another one. Let me see. So the token here, it's a JWT, a JWT token. And you could take a look at that. In this case, there's no actual data there, so I can do this, but don't do this with actual tokens, please. So if you inspect what's inside, you will be able to see that the scope list here has patient read, and observation read in there. And of course, the FHIR server, it has to ask the authorization server to see if it's still valid, but then that can be used by the FHIR server to limit only to those resource types and to the read interactions in this case.
Okay, that's clear. Thanks.
You're welcome. Another one there, Louis? Oh, sorry. I'll get to you.
In the user scope that you talked about, we take on the scenario that you mentioned. The user is a healthcare professional, and the system that he's querying is a hospital information system, for example. And so how is the link being made to what a certain user can actually access? So how is the link being made between the healthcare professional and which patients he should have access to?
So that's up to you, your implementation of the authorization part, and of course in combination with an identity server as well, because you need to know who that user is. But you need to somehow be able to get a list of patients that are maybe this healthcare professionals list that they can see. So that's not something that FHIR will say, and also I think Smart on FHIR doesn't say how to approach that best, but you have to, you're correct, you have to have some way to find out this is the list of patients that that particular user can actually access data for. Yeah.
Yep, thank you. I have a few questions. Can you scroll up a little bit on the token? Right. Okay, so you have the patient ID within the token, so that's how the servers know.
Yeah. So in this field here, you can see the patient in scope is Adam. And this could still be part of the token that is the end result. If this was what the doctor clicked on, they may have clicked on the patient that I want to see information for is Adam. Doesn't help you with knowing that he can select Adam, but you will be able to have that in the token if that's relevant. So in this case, we have the patient field there. So that limits to just data that is Adam's data. But we also have that FHIR user field, and this could have been a healthcare professional, a practitioner resource. So that would be a FHIR resource. In this case, it is Adam as the user here, but that could also have indicated the practitioner.
Okay, great, thanks. And that's part of the standard of Smart, right? Those scope name, those.
Yes. So the FHIR user one is in the scopes that Smart on FHIR specifies, and the patient as well.
All right, perfect, thanks. And for not a patient, for a user, for example, if we want to do fine-grained authorization, so this user can only see patients for that hospital or whatever, how do you manage that?
Well, that was the question there, I think, as well. So you have to have some ID of when this is the practitioner logging in, or maybe it's a related person logging in, that they are actually allowed to see the patient. What you could do is, I don't know where you would want to store it, but you will usually have a user interface, right? Because you don't want the user to see all of this. So there's a user interface, they log in, and then they can have a drop-down list of the resources, the patients that they have access to. How you populate that drop-down list, that's the connection step. So that's not something that Smart on FHIR says anything about, or FHIR says anything about, but that could be in your system's workflow.
Right, that's what I thought, thanks.
So maybe that helps a little bit, but doesn't solve your problem.
Hello. Yeah, my question kind of similar, but it's about standalone patient app launch. Let's imagine we have application on a smartphone, and user goes to this application and log into this using some external identity provider like Google, Facebook, whatever. And is there a way to connect this user with the patient resource in our FHIR database? How we would know that this specific user who logged in with the Google is this patient?
That is if you allow to log in through Google, right? So you would have to have some step there. And I have to say, that's not what I'm an expert on. So there are people that have made sure that you can connect an identity provider to your authorization server. There are people from Google running around here, right? So maybe you could ask them, how do you connect to any other system to be the identity provider? Maybe you have some kind of a guide for getting that in place. But yeah, that's just something that I do not know myself.
Thanks. And the second question is about the scopes in the version 2, about the search parameters in these scopes. How does FHIR server how to say, enforce these search parameters? Does it just compare the search parameters get allowed in the scopes with the search parameters from the request, or?
Usually they would do something like that, yeah. So similar to this patient field being populated with Adam as the value, it would somewhere filter on the patient being patient Adam. And similarly, if in the inspection of the scopes, it sees that you have read permission with this limit, with this search parameter limit, then it would have to filter on that. So that's just filtering, and a FHIR server is usually capable of performing searches already, right? So if it's capable of doing that, it can also internally do that based on the information that's inside of the token. So however your process is around filtering, that's what you can reuse for the information in that part of the token.
Thank you.
Just wanted to add that there were a presentation, I think yesterday, saying that for the federation with Azure Entra, so you can also go and check with this. And for OAuth, we also do the federation, but so someone needs to take track of who to match identity with a user claim.
Hello, thank you. Is there any link behind the scene with FHIR compartments?
There could be. So that will be up to server implementation again. So maybe if I have patient Adam and the server works with the patient compartment on the server side, they already know what's part of the details around Adam. But it's not specified that you have to use compartments, but you could make use of it in some cases, yes.
Thank you.
I think there was another last question up front. Did you? Okay. Anyone else? Well, then I would like to thank you for attending my presentation, and I wish you a good rest of your dev days.